I think there's just like the frustrating, simple ingredient to a lot of big time winter weather events in the US. And I feel silly even saying it, but it's sometimes overlooked when we have one of these big storm systems coming up. There's a lot of like hype on social media, what have you, with respect to the storm system coming through this weekend, particularly for the southeast. But in order to get like a big wintertime storm system that's going to affect a number of people, you actually need cold winter air. Now, that seems obvious. It's January. It needs to be cold to snow. But that ingredient can be overlooked sometimes. If you have a lot of warm air, if you have like 30, 40, 50 degree Fahrenheit air, it's hard to bring those temperatures down. It's hard to get snowfall. It's hard to get ice, right, if temperatures are above freezing. Now, that kind of simple, obvious fact ends up playing a big role, as you might imagine, in these winter storm setups. And so whenever I'm like forecasting out ahead of them, like we are here for this wintertime weekend system, I'm looking across the United States currently here on Tuesday morning, like how much cold air do we have? What's in the savings bank, if you will, of cold air. And when I look across the forecast here for this morning, I actually, instead of pulling up like the current forecast temperatures, I'm going to pull up, let's see if I can get that to load really quick. Let's do like 6 a.m. I'm recording this video about 6 a.m. Tuesday, so let's do it there. And you can see we are locked in with cold air across a wide area of the continental U.S., anywhere from, at least like with respect to that freezing line, through, California, Oregon, Washington, at least the eastern 2/3 above the elevation in those northwest states. And that freezing line extends through central Texas down to the Gulf Coast, in some cases all the way over to like South Carolina and the North Carolina as well. And so at least here on Tuesday, this could change as we play through the forecast. I'm going to do that in just a few seconds. We have a lot of that cold air. And so that just kind of ups the ante on any storm system coming through, whether it be one of those little troughs, shortwave troughs coming through, a developing low pressure system, a high diving in. If you have a lot of cold air, like we tend to do in the middle late part of January, you increase the odds of more inclement, impactful wintertime weather. And if I play this forecast forward through today into Wednesday, you notice that freezing line shifting to the north over the Midwest over the next few days, but a cold front quickly ends that as we go through Thursday into Friday. Much deeper cold air. You're now talking down into the negative 30s. This is Fahrenheit units into the Midwest down to like negative 10. Near Chicago, Minneapolis, in the negative 20s. Now you're seeing much colder air move through on Saturday. You see right at the end of this clip here on Sunday morning, that cold air damming effect. That cold air gets swung around the Appalachians, pushed in towards cities like Atlanta, through North Carolina, South Carolina as well. And that freezing line, still near the Gulf Coast. This is now Monday and Tuesday, and just locked in with cold air across the Midwest. So any storm system that's going to come through in the midst of that is going to have plenty of very, very deep, cold, kind of Arctic winter air with which to work with to produce these inclement weather, whether it be freezing rain, whether it be snow, what have you, or just very cold winds and cold air advisories, which we have plenty of. So I always look at that kind of to start. Do we have that cold air bank, or do we have to make our cold air? Some systems can kind of like make their own colder air and the mid-levels, and that's usually not a reliable producer of like big-time winter weather events. But in this case, we're starting out very cold, and we're getting colder, and that increases the chances for kind of a more significant event, if you will, across what's looking like the mid-south, the southeast. Another thing that's playing a role here, we kind of showed it right at the end. In fact, I'm going to play that quickly. I want to showcase that cold air damming along the Carolinas, even into Georgia here. As that cold drops in, especially behind a cold front, you can see it kind of gets trapped here. That's that damming effect against the higher elevation of the Appalachians to the west. And so that cold air gets trapped in this like tongue here. And there's a good example of that happening at the end of Saturday and then into Sunday. And that's only going to increase the impacts, right, of those wintertime, storm events that come through here, because you have more cold air, right? It's kind of how I started the video with. Now, obviously, you need cold air for winter storms, but Matt's stressing this morning that you need a lot of it to get these big time systems, and it appears we have that recipe now setting up for this weekend. Another thing we have, Eric talked through this extensively yesterday, is this kind of deformation zone. If you look at the 850 millibar winds for this Saturday, I took this out to the 24th, you just have this perfect recipe of, Atlantic Gulf moisture. If you follow these streamlines in the lower levels of the atmosphere, you're just pumping air in here. The Appalachians obviously sit right here. There's elevation, and you're just on a collision course here with this warm, moist air mass with that very, very deep cold here across the Midwest to produce, a significant event here. I almost just like eyeball this and say, all right, where's the biggest, area of convergence? And if I had to like point at one area, I would say like right in here. And that's northern Georgia. That's like the southern tip of the Appalachians. You're talking like Atlanta and north. And I would guess, by the end of Saturday, heading into Sunday, something significant is occurring here with respect to precipitation, likely some form of freezing rain, combination with mixed over to snow, and then ultimately a bigger snow event even further north than that. We'll talk about the specifics in just a second. But just kind of eyeballing this from afar here on Tuesday, right? We have like 3 to 4 days to go before this weekend wintertime storm system. The ingredients are coming together for a significant news-making event across the southeast. And what's responsible for that is the deep high, Eric mentioned yesterday, and that cold air that's diving in. We're already seeing the results of this. We have cold weather advisories now across the eastern kind of Corn Belt here, up through the upper Midwest as well. Winter weather advisories for portions of the Great Lakes. We have kind of an ongoing lake effect snow kind of week that's still has more cycles to go through. If we look at the current radar here this morning, you'll notice this winter weather advisory over in the eastern U.S., and we can see some snow showers pushing through there, even through like the Golden Triangle of Montana, all the way through the eastern part of that state. Some light snow now falling through the Dakotas as well. Very cold across the Midwest here this morning. I'll pull up the current temperatures in a second, but another one of these like snow squall, snow showers ripping through the Midwest here over the next 24 to 48 hours. So we're going to see that come through here. If we look closely at, let's see if I can make that a little bit closer here, over near Lake Ontario, another one of these lake effect snow events. And I don't want to pull up the local radar, but at least get us a view here of that lake effect snow band just heading over toward the eastern part of Lake Ontario here. Just tremendous amount of snow likely falling in that area here. If we double back to the all hazards, you'll see winter storm warnings posted not only for Buffalo, New York, but up further east in upstate New York as well. Meanwhile, over in the western U.S., we have that dense fog advisory through the entire Central Valley of California, both the Sacramento and the San Joaquin Valley. Still indicative, even the kind of stagnant air advisory here, that we have a pattern that looks like this, with the high trapped under here. You're not mixing and moving that air around much. That allows, one, two-leaf fog to develop in the Central Valley, but also allows just air to get trapped in a lot of these kind of higher elevation valleys here, both the Snake River and over here in the Columbia Basin as well. Freeze watches and warnings still out for Florida and southeast Georgia. This has been a common theme here in the middle and heart of winter, and now we're pushing that colder air further out of the north into this area, again setting up that playbook here for this weekend. I do want to jump over and look quickly, as I mentioned I would. I'll just jump over to ag weather. We'll pull up those current temperatures, and again, if you want winter, you need to have cold air, and we have that savings bank built in. Look at Eau Claire down negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit this morning. It's already 7 a.m. Recording this a little bit later than I usually do, and you're still seeing just tremendously cold air, this kind of tropospheric reflection, if you will, of the polar vortex here over the Hudson Bay, and it's just allowing this reservoir of cold air, Arctic wintertime air, to spill into the eastern U.S. this week and set us up for what we're going to go through here on Friday and Saturday. Now, if I play this back and I look at the jet stream from a high level, I mentioned that ridging off to the west. If anything, it's moved even a little bit off the west coast here, still allowing some of those stagnant air advisories and the two-leaf fog to develop in California. And then you see this deep trough, right? There's that reflection of the polar vortex here over the Hudson Bay, almost like right over the Hudson Bay, allowing that cold air to slide into this area. If I looked at this, it wouldn't be obvious to me that we're about to have one of these bigger time weekend winter weather setups. And it's because actually the cold air is here, but you're looking for the low that's going to cause that disruption, right? That's going to bring that air up from the Atlantic, up from the Gulf to kick off the precipitation in the front that's going to move through there. Now, this tells you where the cold air came from, but it doesn't tell you where that low is going to come from, where that kind of disturbance is. Now, you might say, well, there's this little notch here in the jet stream flow. That's actually what's producing that snowfall that we looked at just a second ago over Montana. That's going to slide through the Midwest, but that trajectory, we've talked about this last week, isn't great for sourcing moisture. To get something to source a bunch of moisture out of this region here, you really need something cutting across this way. And we've talked about that, kind of shifting that flow around to get better moisture either into the southeast or the middle part of the U.S. or even the eastern U.S. You need something moving almost southwest to northeast like that, if not just west to east. Now, what's surprising about this is that system is on the map here, and it's over here. It's not quite a cutoff yet, but it's this little trough here west of California, well out over the Pacific. That's going to kind of jump here, surprisingly, sneak under this ridge. When these ridges get really amplified like this, you can see this one, if I'm going to draw the axis of this ridge, I'm all the way here in Cabo, and I'm pulling it all the way up to like Flagstaff, Alaska, maybe even north of that. And when they get this elongated, it allows these little lows and troughs to sneak underneath them. And that's exactly what's going to happen here. And as that trough sneaks under, it's going to link up with all this cold air ushered in by the polar vortex and produce this potential winter weather time system. We can see this here looking at the 500 millibar vorticity from the ECMWF forecast. Let's make this valid as of this morning at 6 a.m. There's that low. You can see that on the 500 millibar vorticity. And as I play this forward, you'll see that it cuts off finally over the next 48 hours for California. It's going to sit here on the ECMWF and stall on Saturday. And then by Saturday at midnight, Sunday morning, it's now stalling, linking up with this system that's coming out of the northern plains. And that's going to help bring in that kind of southwest to northeast look that I mentioned just a slide ago, and pull all that moisture up into this region here. And now you have your proper shortwave trough right over the middle part of the country, helping to produce that system. Now that sort of jump, that sneaking under of the ridge, if you will, is a delicate process. And then these cutoff lows are never modeled perfectly well. There's always uncertainty. So I'm going to echo what you heard yesterday from Eric, that we know either the freezing rain or snow swath is going to continue to jump around this week, and we can't put too much weight into any individual model run. Now, I say that, and I'm going to play forward the ECMWF individual model run from this morning, because I want to see what this looks like. Every 6 hours, we're seeing the update to where the system's coming through. Now, first, let's talk about this little low. This is the first one that we kind of caught our eye. That's going to swing through the Midwest here, kind of the state line between Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois here over the next 24 hours. That sneaks through Detroit, and then the eastern Great Lakes here, another little system behind that one. By Wednesday, the 21st, seeing a little bit of precipitation in the form of just rain here now percolate into Louisiana and the southern Mississippi Valley. As we go forward on Thursday now into Friday morning, now we're getting that system. Remember, we watched it jump from the Pacific into the southwest, and that rainfall beginning now over Texas. This is Friday evening around dinner time, at least Central Time, 6 p.m. And that cold air is here, and we're going to see this battle zone play out. Potential freezing rain here over the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area. I'm going to stress again, this is just the morning model run from the ECMWF that came out overnight. That freezing rain stretches east over to the southern Mississippi Valley. Little Rock now getting in on heavy snow at this point. This would include Memphis with heavy snow in this corridor here, with the freezing rain shifting east. Heavy snow over the western high plains and the panhandle. We're now seeing freezing rain stretch over to Atlanta. You remember I said, when we just eyeballed this map, I said, where is the most significant convergence for precipitation? I said kind of right in that area here. And you're seeing the precipitation rate, regardless of what kind of precipitation type it is, really kind of go off the charts in this corridor here. Talking like Chattanooga, western North Carolina, getting up to like Clemson, Spartanburg. This area here, a ton of precipitation now coming down through Sunday into Sunday morning. Snowfall initially over North Carolina, now into Virginia, trying to shift over at some point. When you get outside of the influence of that cold air damming at this point on Sunday, there's almost kind of the negative to it, which is, or the opposite, where you get warmer air on the windward side of the Appalachians. So you're seeing that snow line shift to the north before ultimately curling up, almost tries to like Miller B into like a little, nor'easter here, and you're getting snow all the way now through Illinois into Pennsylvania, Allegheny, all the way over to New York. This low still kind of sitting here on Monday, and now by Tuesday spinning up almost into a nor'easter at this point, bringing heavy snow to the northeast, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Boston, with likely decent snowfall coming down in New York and the Metro East as well. So this is that's an impressive 5-day forecast here from the ECMWF. Oh boy, I said that fast. ECMWF. And the GFS, I can tell you right now, is just we saw yesterday, is different. And so now I'm comparing the two, and I'm looking on the left to the GFS. I'm going to play this forecast forward. Rainfall starts in the southern Mississippi Valley tomorrow. We already talked through that. Tomorrow evening, that cold front kind of stalls there west of the Appalachians. We're still seeing that rain kind of filter in here across the southeast. Remember, we said by Friday evening, this event's underway in Texas, with the rainfall coming down in East Texas. And you can see the GFS initially, even a little bit earlier, Friday dinner time, has that freezing rain potential starting near the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And that continues into Saturday morning, stretching now into southern Mississippi, Valley area like Louisiana, southern Arkansas, Mississippi. Snowfall now coming down along the Red River of the South and Little Rock on the GFS. But you're starting even by Saturday at noon seeing the differences between the two. Namely, on the ECMWF, we see a stronger system. We see higher precipitation values and even like a little bit of a deeper low here off the Texas coastline. Now, as Eric mentioned yesterday, this is more of a high pressure driven event, but there's still a trough and there's still a little low pressure system here. And the strength of that low is stronger on this current ECMWF model suite versus the GFS. The GFS keeps it flatter. It moves it through quicker. By this point now, Saturday evening, the GFS trying to produce that freezing rain in South Carolina and northern Georgia. It's struggling with that compared to the ECMWF, and the snowfall near Chattanooga and western North Carolina isn't as strong. We still see the stretching back through the southern Mississippi Valley on Saturday evening. So a long duration freezing rain event on both models, potentially in portions of Texas with sleet coming down as well. And then the ECMWF, a much broader snowfall event from Oklahoma all the way through the Carolinas into the mid-Atlantic, whereas the GFS is much quicker, kind of shifting this out on Sunday morning. Brings a bit of snow to the mid-Atlantic, even the Northeast, but not nearly as much. You see the ECMWF, by Sunday at dinner times, wrapping this up, we still see, that cold air damming and freezing rain coming down potentially, along with sleet here over the Carolinas, northern Georgia. At this point, the GFS on Sunday evening is shifting this low well off into the Atlantic, and we see just more of this like little backside snow and light rain, light snow shower event across the southeast. At this point, the ECMWF now Monday morning trying to bring snowfall through the mid-Atlantic in Illinois and through Indiana, now Ohio, and the GFS shifting that front further to the south across Florida. At least that part is in agreement with the ECMWF, but the snow is long gone at this point, save for this little clipper system coming around. So a significant difference between the two models 4 to 5 days out. That's not totally uncommon, but it's surprising, to see that right now. And the problem is this is more of that high-driven event. It's not a big low-driven event, and so the models are kind of disagreeing on where and when it increases and starts to strengthen as that little low I mentioned near Texas kind of cuts across toward the mid-Atlantic. Now, comparing the snow totals right now, as you'd imagine, looking at that ECMWF earlier, the snow totals are much more impressive. So you're talking a foot plus, portions of the Carolina, into Virginia. You're even seeing like 6 to 8 to 10 inches up through the Metro East. Cities like Philadelphia, DC getting in on 6+ inches of rain. That stretches all the way up through like Rhode Island, even like Massachusetts and Boston getting up over like 3 to 5 inches of snow. Stretching back through Oklahoma City, this current model run has 10.4 inches of snow in Oklahoma City. I don't think we'd actually see that much accumulate, but it would be a significant snow event nonetheless, from like Memphis to Chattanooga up to Nashville, Knoxville, over into the Ohio River Valley, even some of these cities here. So the ECMWF run here is a doozy, and we know this is going to shift around both the strength and intensity of the snowfall and the line of where exactly that rain snow line sets up. You can see where it currently is here on the northern periphery of the Gulf Coast states at this point. And Little Rock up near almost exactly a foot of snowfall in this forecast from the ECMWF. The freezing rain forecast is probably more significant just in terms of impacts to obviously travel. And you can see there's kind of two bullseyes showing up. One in East Texas, we mentioned the long duration event there. We don't show accumulations on this, but when you start to get into that deep like wine color, 2 inches of freezing rain accumulations, I believe we're on inches, yeah. You're getting up into like catastrophic ice damage at this point. So concerned about this corridor here, and concerned obviously about Atlanta through South Carolina as well. There's these two bullseyes that I'm going to keep my eye on, and I don't want to ignore the areas in between because we could still see significant icing over toward the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area, up into North Carolina, including Alabama. But you can kind of see the models focusing on two areas here that we're going to have to watch pretty closely. But I say that all, the GFS is shifting between those two. So we see that freezing rain event here over East Texas, actually a little bit further south. We see this event stretching through like Meridian, Mississippi, up through like Tuscaloosa into northeast Alabama, western Georgia, and then not as much icing kind of outside this corridor here. And surprisingly shifting this further to the south with a faster event, you have a less duration of that ice. Now, what's going on between the two? Why is the GFS weaker with the system and even a little bit further south with that rain snow line? And while I'm here on the GFS, I might as well show the snow total because I didn't bring that up before. And if I pull this back, let's keep this forecast, a much narrower band of snow through the Red River of the South, through northern Mississippi. Chattanooga would be in on it, but it doesn't wrap that low up. Remember, we didn't see that low wrap nearly as much up to the northeast. We still see those high values here over the southern Appalachians and eastern Tennessee. This is like right over the Smokies there in western North Carolina. Again, right where we eyeballed earlier that the strongest convergence would be. But that's a much narrower snow swath on the GFS. Despite that, still high values. Now, the difference between the two, it's that, as you'd imagine, that little trough sneaking over from California. So I went ahead and pulled up the 500 millibar vorticity. This is from tropicaltidbits.com, just to kind of compare the two one-to-one. I'll blow those up. Let's make those bigger. And I want to even get them the same size so we can compare them one-to-one. I pulled up this forecast for the 500 millibar vorticity from the GFS on Sunday morning. And by that point, the models were pretty well diverged. And that trough on the GFS that's sneaking from the Pacific over into the southern U.S. versus the ECMWF, it's flatter on the GFS. And it's even a little bit quicker coming through. And so what's going to happen on the GFS, because this trough and this trough aren't really talking to one another, they still have this kind of disconnect between them, this one's going to fly through here much quicker. And when they kind of commingle and interfere with one another, they're going to slow each other down. And on the ECMWF, these are more commingled together. This almost looks like one big, deeper trough. And that's allowing this trough here to slow down. It stalls, it amplifies further. It allows that low to develop as it kind of swings around. I said Miller B earlier, but that's more of the Miller A kind of scenario playing out with respect to these lows coming up in the Gulf Coast. And it's that little difference between how these troughs are talking to one another on the ECMWF that allows it to slow down, amplify, and make for a much more impactful system. Now, the GFS is still impactful on its own, but the ECMWF has a wider array of hazards. And then jumping back over, again, I just want to pull up the snowfall values on the GFS, still seeing values in eastern Tennessee rise up and above the foot level in terms of snowfall accumulations, even through North Carolina, southeast Virginia, getting over to like Norfolk here with that heavy snowfall through the Red River of the South. Dallas-Fort Worth still, even on this GFS forecast, up to 8 inches. I mean, Memphis, significant snowfall through there, but a much narrower band of heavy snow and a narrower band with less impacts to the ice, obviously, with this weaker GFS system, which is still going to be a news-making event if it comes through, even if this current forecast holds. As a result of all of that, the National Weather Service Weather Prediction Center here, the all hazards map shows that hazard is cold and that all these colors look blue right now. Let's call this the more normal looking blue here color. Through this week, obviously I mentioned at the beginning of this video, if you want to have a big wintertime storm system, you're going to need cold air. Freezing rain through a quarter from the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area all the way through the northern kind of third of Mississippi. You're talking the northern tier of Louisiana. I would say probably south of Little Rock at this point with respect to freezing rain through again, I mentioned Chattanooga, but through South Carolina and then maybe the southern periphery of North Carolina. The freezing rain would be the most perilous hazard of this event in terms of its impact to travel and potential accidents. So keep that in mind. Obviously, the cold behind the system is going to be significant as well, just in terms of very deep, cold Arctic air. And then the heavy snow. That's probably going to make the most newsworthy hype on social media, what have you, through a corridor stretching through the Red River of the South into Oklahoma City, certainly through Little Rock, Memphis, Nashville, southeast Kentucky, into much of, if not all of Virginia, and then potentially starting to sneak up to DC through the northeast if that ECMWF forecast solution holds. I want to cover temperatures really quickly right now. Obviously, we talked about how early this week that cold air has settled in. There's a brief warm up here tomorrow as this low swings through that little low we mentioned at the beginning. By Thursday and Friday, there's that polar vortex slamming down. Very deep cold air through Minnesota, Wisconsin, -20. Just very cold air through the Midwest, setting up this event and this collision here across the Gulf Coast states. That furthers on Sunday. Look at Dallas-Fort Worth on Sunday down to 16 degrees Fahrenheit. Oklahoma City down to 7. Very cold air now settling in across the eastern half of the continental U.S., save for Florida. And that continues on Monday as well. Driving this is this 1054 high pressure system. This is analyzed on Friday now. You get a 1054 high in the middle of January, I can tell you you're going to have a very cold air over the middle part of the country. And that's why we see those deep -20s in through Minnesota and Wisconsin. So you're approaching record territory, 1055 high potentially over the Great Plains, over South Dakota, and it's going to be a lot of high pressure in this corridor here. It's almost like Siberian-like high over, our best analog to the Siberia in North America, which would be the Canadian Prairie or the Northern Plains in January, and that is setting up this system that we're seeing. You don't see a deep low kind of spinning up. I'll play this forward. Eric mentioned there's that low, 1016 low. We don't usually call them that, but it tries to form, at least on the ECMWF here off the coast of North Carolina, setting up some more snowfall for the mid-Atlantic early next week. That's not occurring on the GFS. All right, I'll play this out in the long range. Getting to time on this video, so I want to go through this kind of quickly here. If I do play this forecast out, I'm kind of gloss over this current system that we just talked about for 25 minutes and play this forward, because next week we see more of the same with troughing over the northeast and the eastern part of the country, that cold air now lingering next week, but this ridging over the western U.S. The start of this video saying it was amplified up like in this direction, allowing that trough to sneak underneath. But by next week, we're actually seeing it push west to east and some ridging getting out into the middle part of the country near the turn of the month, going into February 1st. We also see better troughing now across the Pacific and potentially flow coming all the way into California by that time period as well. That has me wondering if we're going to improve precipitation across the western U.S., which has been few and far between over the last 2 weeks. And sure enough, at least from the ECMWF ensemble, their 8 to 14 day precipitation outlook, we do see that better precipitation chance, at least for the state of California, lesser so, unfortunately, for the Cascades. We do see drier conditions prevail here across the east, with that troughing over the east, kind of shifting even further east. That keeps this area in the drier corridor here. But obviously, this stretch here going to be very wet this weekend with some sort of precipitation coming down, probably the full gamut of it, frankly, as we go through Friday, Saturday, and Sunday across the southeast. If we look across the 4 panels of the precipitation outlook in through that kind of end of the month period, all the way through February 2nd in this case on the CPC, they are going up with higher values for just the west coast, so actually including the Cascades, maybe on the chance for some of that better precipitation near the end of the month. We'll see about California. They're still keeping the southwest. And then the middle, like let's call this the Tennessee and Ohio River valleys on the drier side, which we saw in the forecast. The other panels here, ECMWF AIFS, drier for the west, and the GFS ensemble, drier for the west as well in that later time period. So the ECMWF ensemble kind of on an island, bringing that precipitation into California. But it wouldn't shock me, based on some of the analogs that we've seen in the MJO for early February, if we do shift over a little bit wetter in the west after that MJO transitions through 8, 1, and 2. Long range, looking at the temperatures, the story doesn't change too much. Obviously, with the west going over a little bit wetter, you tend to think they're probably going to be warm ahead of that, and that's the case looking at the 10 to 15 day temperature anomalies. Warm in the west, cool in the east, continuing the stretch that we've seen now play out here a bit in January, with the cold weather settling in for the eastern half of the country. As a result of that, natural gas prices, which in the very cold air we started winter with at the end of November through the holidays into early December, were rallying. Since then, we went into the very warm Christmas time kind of period through New Year's and early January, and those prices kind of lost those highs there almost totally, and now spiking up again. Natural gas here, at least this week, starting to see a rise in that as well, so potentially the market's accounting for this forecast shift. If we look at the ECMWF, as Eric mentioned yesterday, still expecting this transition from 7, 8, 1 to 2. This is an impressive wintertime transition. It gives us a lot of analogs, which is why we like it, especially in January and February. And if we look at those analogs out into February for like phase 1 and 2, we see a lot of this troughing over the eastern part of the country. I'm kind of looking in this area here. I'll pull this up on my cursor. But we also see, I'm starting to notice, better flow out of the Pacific on like phases 1. We have a jet stream extension here. And as that extends into February, better flow pushing toward California, which is why it wouldn't shock me if at some point in February we return to some of these better atmospheric river events, because we're worried about California and a lot of the western snowpack right now, given the fast start to the year in some of the areas, but it's gone over drier, obviously. And even some of these long-range forecasts, as I mentioned earlier, still on the dry side, but I do think it's possible, and maybe even likely, given some of these analogs for that phase 1 and 2 transition, that the west goes over with one of these atmospheric river events. The long-range forecast from the European model isn't conclusive with that regard, keeping it wetter over Oregon and Washington, but not so much for the Sierras in California. But I don't think the ECMWF extended model has been giving us that much signal right now. It's a lot of noise which is to be expected from these long-range models anyway. I'll leave it there today. Stay safe this weekend. I'll talk with you all on Thursday. We'll have a better idea of whether the ECMWF or the GFS is winning out with respect to that forecast. We tend to lean on the ECMWF, but for any single individual like storm system, it's not to say that we can dismiss the GFS summarily. So I'll be watching every 6 hours those new model runs, and we'll talk to you about it here. Thanks for watching.